Hello, and welcome to the official podcast of the Cleveland International Film Festival, SIF Speaks, sponsored by Wayside Furniture. I'm Dee Perry, and I'm joined by my producer and co-host, Aaron Spears. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Dee, how's it going?
Pretty good now. This year's festival, SIF 45 Streams, has a theme, Bring Film Home, that speaks to the online format. But I think the theme also speaks to film's ability to bring home important ideas and help us see how we're part of a global community.
You are very, very correct, Dee. And the film we're talking about on this edition of SIF Speaks does just that. Welcome Strangers is the title of a short film by director-producer Dia Sokol-Savage, and she joins us today along with the film's subject, Sarah Jackson.
So, Sarah, the film revolves around your creation of a space called Casa de Paz, a House of Peace. Describe what it is and why you thought it should exist.
Yeah, Casa de Paz means House of Peace, and we are we have a hospitality home located about 15 minutes away from the ICE Immigrant Detention Center in Denver, Colorado. And we provide support for immigrants who are leaving the detention center as they seek to reunite with their families or their friends or their sponsors across the United States. And I decided to start Casa de Paz because I witnessed families being separated at the US-Mexico border, and it broke my heart. I knew that it was not the right way to treat people. I knew I wouldn't want to be treated that way, definitely wouldn't want my family to be treated that way. And this was one simple thing that I could do to express my love for people and to create a better world for all of us to live in.
And when you say you witnessed the separations at the border, were you there physically or were you watching news reports?
I was physically there. I actually got invited to go down to the Mexico-US border to learn more about immigration. At the time that I got that invite, I honestly wasn't that interested in learning, but it was an all expenses paid trip to Mexico. So of course I said yes. And I went down there, and that's where I saw families being separated. I had dinner with fathers who were just deported from their children. I was spending time in the desert with asylum seekers who were coming to the United States for a better life. And it was really then when I had that face-to-face interaction with the folks who are directly impacted that I had that kind of pit in my stomach that I knew what I had just seen and heard and witnessed was wrong.
Dee, I was wondering, how did you first come up, I guess two-part question. How did you first come to know Casa de Paz, but then also what about it made you want to start building a film project around?
So I first heard of the work that Sarah and Oliver and the volunteers of Casa de Paz were doing in the summer of 2018. That was the summer of the Trump administration's zero tolerance policy. And like so many people, I felt powerless and helpless and angry and just a whole bunch of feelings that were, awful. And I had been very, very focused on the news and reports coming out of the border and wondering what I could do. And actually, my mom, who's from Denver, went to a training at Casa de Paz. And she called me that night and said, "Oh, I just went to this really cool thing." And as soon as she described what Casa de Paz and Sarah are doing, I was just very compelled. I was very interested. I'm a filmmaker, so I like to tell stories. I'm always looking for interesting stories. But mostly I hadn't thought, I've been so focused about what is happening on the border that I really hadn't given any thought to the 24 hours or 48 hours for somebody who's just been released into this country and what happens to them. And I wanted to meet this woman who was thinking about that period of time.
Sarah, you and your team of volunteers have been reuniting families separated by immigration detention for almost 9 years. What have been some of the challenges you faced doing that work during that time?
The realization that so many people are suffering. And yes, we have this ability to come alongside at one of the most traumatic experiences of their life to offer compassion and friendship is like Dia mentioned earlier, something that we can do. But to know that this didn't start, immigrant detention and family separations didn't start 1 year ago or 2 years ago or under a certain administration. This has been going on for decades. And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges is understanding that this is something that is, in my eyes, an evil practice of this country and not necessarily seeing an end in sight. That has pretty much been one of the biggest challenges, is just the vicarious trauma that we experience by spending a lot of time with people who have been experiencing trauma firsthand. And so we've set up some support systems for our volunteers to be able to go to therapy, to talk about these things that they are hearing when they spend time with folks who've been released from the detention center. But I think for me personally, that's been one of the biggest challenges, is seeing this overwhelming evil in this country and feeling like, is this ever going to end, right? And we play a small part in putting a little bit of a Band-Aid on this broken system, but we also encourage people to dig a little bit deeper at the root causes of why people are fleeing their homes and why they feel like coming to the United States is their only option for survival. And so really digging a little bit deeper and seeing the bigger causes of migration and how we can affect change at a systemic level.
And just in terms of the film, I was curious while I was watching about just the mechanism. I mean, when you and your volunteers approach someone who's being released from detention, do they know that you're there to help them, or are you convincing them in the moment to go with you?
Yes, both. Sometimes people know about us because we have a pen pal program. We actually originally had a visitation program, but because of COVID, all of the in-person visits have stopped. So we switched over to a pen pal program. And so our pen pal volunteers can write their pen pal who's detained and let them know, if you get out, look for Casa de Paz volunteers. They're there to help you and kind of explain the services that we provide. But then also in the film, you watched Javier, who you could see the fear on his face when he met our volunteers. He didn't know if he could trust us or not. And we later, as the evening progressed and he decided to get into the car, and we brought him to the casa, and he was able to call his family and hear his wife's voice and speak with his children and have a nice dinner. He told us, as he kind of got a little bit more comfortable, that there was a moment where he almost wanted to jump out of the car because he was scared. But then he said, I had no other choice. I had to trust that God was going to take care of me. And I think that speaks to the strength of immigrants who are being released from these detention centers, and the hard spot that they are in. And so I'm grateful that Javier took the leap of faith, and I hope today that he's glad that he took that leap of faith too.
I think that's pretty typical. It's not like most of the nights people get released and just know exactly where they are and what's going on. Like, that we really wanted in the film to convey the disorientation that happens for people when they're let out. And I don't know if it's clear in the film, but people are not being released out of the front of the detention center. They're released out the back door, which is even more industrial, more confusing, less signage to sort of orient you. And, there are some very funny stories that come from it. People are using, Google Translate and trying to explain, there's such a variety of languages and folks who need rides and help. But yeah, there's also just a lot of suspicion, and people cannot tell if, the volunteers are ICE or well-intentioned. So we really wanted to try to capture some of that confusion and see the process of how immigrants come to understand that they're in very good and safe hands.
Yeah, you did a good job of that, because I was nervous for them as they got in the cars and said, are they going to be okay?
Well, you can imagine that people all along the journey of coming to the United States have been taken advantage of. There was a reason that they had to leave home. There was a reason that it was too dangerous for them to stay. And then along the journey, people are robbed, kidnapped, extorted, murdered. And then they get to the border where they think they finally found safety, and they're arrested and handcuffed and put into a prison indefinitely. And then they're just, boom, released, sometimes in the middle of the night. And so I can definitely understand why it would raise an eyebrow when all of a sudden there's this very kind group of people coming alongside saying, hey, jump into my car. We'll take care of you. And actually, I remember one time, it's a pretty sad story. We had a guest stay at the house, and as we were on our way to the airport, we were just packing up some stuff last minute, and the family called me and they said, hey, thank you for taking care of our father. What is it that you need us to do in order for him to leave? Do you need us to send you money? What is it that you need from us? And I said, no, absolutely not. There's nothing, but people are used to, okay, you're getting this from somebody and this is what you owe them. And so oftentimes families will try to make a donation to the casa to express their appreciation. And I try to say thank you, but we would love it if you actually took that money and went out to celebrate with a nice dinner or something like that. But sometimes guests are very, very stubborn, which I can appreciate because I'm very stubborn too. And I'll find a $20 bill sort of just tucked away when I'm cleaning the house, which is always a nice surprise.
Dia, I wanted to ask kind of a production question because it is very intimate, and the scene, as you already referenced, of Javier just sitting in the car. Obviously, the camera is sitting right there in the back seat as well. How did you go about navigating the production there, where like you're capturing such intimate moments, but you yourself and the camera aren't really part of the story? It's just there, kind of very journalistically documenting it as you went. How did that dynamic play out in the production?
Well, there were two things. One is, of course, first and foremost, we followed the lead of Sarah and the volunteers. We didn't want to step on any part of their process, but we also knew that just by virtue of having a camera there and another person or a team, really, that we were going to disrupt things a little bit. And so there were a lot of things happening off camera. We had a translator on hand so that we could explain to people, repeat again and again what we were doing there and make sure that they were comfortable. And, we didn't take it for granted that just because somebody sort of said, sure, you can follow me right in the first moments when they've been released, that we wanted to respect the process, that person probably may not feel like they had a lot of agency right at that moment. So we did a lot of check-ins and a lot of,
Sure.
reassurances, discussion about our process. Even in post, we were very rigorous, and we consulted with multiple immigration attorneys to make sure that there was no part of our story that we were telling that would compromise anybody's cases. And, the volunteers themselves are getting right into a car with somebody that they don't know. So, we didn't load our entire team into the car. We tried to have as light of a footprint as possible. But, basically the reality of it is that you're, sharing a small space with someone and then you're bringing them into your house. So we just sort of tried to be as true to the process as possible. That scene with Javier there was no one else in the car except for the cinematographer, Matthias Gronsky, who is a brilliant, amazing camera person who I've worked with for 20 years on every project I've ever been involved with. And, I trusted, as a filmmaker, you just sort of have to trust that things are going to work out for the best. But yeah, it was, there was a lot of, it was a very accelerated. I always believe that any kind of storytelling relies on trust. And we had a very short window to establish that with people. So we really, our goal was to continue building for the entire time that they were at the casa, rather than just thrust a camera in their face and assume it was going to be fine. So there are a lot of check-ins that we edited around.
As interesting you say, like thrusting the camera in the face, there's the scene after Javier's picked up where he's on the phone. I immediately felt a little, I don't know, like I was violating his privacy because he was calling home to check in. And then it's exactly when you kind of pull out and you kind of like let the door close, and he's given that moment where I thought that was really good balance of tone you had there, where like we're somewhat witness to that private moment and the reconnection he has, but we don't really need to see that entire phone conversation. Was that a tough balance to get with some of those personal moments, but not be too in the face, I guess? Well,
okay. To be honest, two things. One is when we filmed, we ended up, in retrospect, I used a camera that did not, normally you use a camera with a long lens, which means you can zoom in. I can stand really far away and zoom in and get a close shot of you. But for this film, we actually decided to use all prime lenses. Just stylistically, we thought that it would give a look and a feel that would work. But I hadn't thought when I had made that decision I hadn't really been thinking about the fact that that means you can't zoom in. So you have to physically move the camera closer for those close shots versus being able
Right.
to hang back. So I'm not sure I would have made that same creative decision. When I first met Sarah and in the months building up to our filming, her number one thing was, I really don't want you to stick cameras in people's faces right when they've been released, which of course made sense. So as much as I want to say like everything is so deliberate, we're geniuses, honestly, there was a learning curve,
Sure.
I think, for us in terms of figuring out what the comfort level was going to be like. And so some of that was being learned on the fly. You know, there's obviously also we filmed in one order, and some of the film ends up, you know, being moved around for story purposes. So the scene you're mentioning was the first night that we shot, and we definitely revised some of how our approach was, you know, and also it was hard because Javier was the most nervous of the people who we had done. Now, ultimately, he, I think, you know, was very happy to share his story, and he got a kick out of it. And you could sort of visibly see him go from being so nervous that, as Sarah said, he wanted to jump out of the car to, by the end of the evening, really feeling like he was among friends. But yes, I wish I could. I don't want to, you know, it's always a process. And I think we actually like learned a lot and kind of refined our process to improve the experience.
Speaking of learning on the fly, Dia, you released this film in February of 2020, and right after that, COVID-19 began to trigger shutdowns all over the world. So, what have you been learning about the impact of Welcome Strangers and the impact of the pandemic on getting the film out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite a hard year for so many filmmakers and films. We have been really fortunate with this. Our outreach plan for this film, you know, it has been heartbreaking not to be able to be in person, you know, at film festivals or in person at screenings. But our outreach plan for this film was always built around the idea that we were going to do community screenings, you know, at churches and synagogues and with activist groups and local community groups, that we were going to try to do, you know, conferences for people who are working around immigration issues, that we were going to try to reach people who maybe hadn't engaged in the immigration debate and hadn't thought that much about it, but maybe persuaded to realize, oh, I could do some small acts of kindness that would really improve the plight of the, you know, these people new to our country. And the nice thing is that we've really been able to do that. You know, it's looked a little bit different, but there have, I'm sure, as you guys know, there's just been so many advances in our ability to bring the film to people. And we've had incredible reception, incredible success, gotten great feedback. People, I mean, Sarah can speak to her experience of what the outreach, you know, the way people have reached out to her, but it's exceeded my expectations. I cried when I first realized, like, oh no, we're never going to be in these theaters with people. But at the same time, it's kind of, the film's so personal and intimate that the fact that people are watching it in their homes from whatever their devices are, I think that's okay. Like, I think that maybe it connects the message a little bit with what people feel like they can do.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Because when I was watching it, Sarah, I was thinking about the intimacy of what you're doing. And then I immediately wondered, how can you do that now in the setting that we're in? How has it affected your ability to carry on?
COVID-19 has definitely changed things at Casa de Paz, and some of the things that it's changed has actually made and improved and made our process better. One of the examples for that is, as soon as someone is released from the detention center, we now have a van which is parked right outside the gates of the detention center. We call it Casa on Wheels. We've converted the van to be a soft landing place. So we put some benches and a table and a hand washing station and some shelves. And we've got a volunteer sitting in the van just keeping an eye out on the gate, so that as soon as someone is released, boom, we're there to welcome them. And we've got a big banner so they know it's Casa de Paz. And that way people aren't wandering around kind of looking lost any longer. The second thing that we've been able to do is purchase same day bus tickets or plane tickets for the guests so that they can get home as soon as possible. Now, that's not always an option. Maybe there's no more flights or buses left for that day. And in that situation right now, we are able to provide a hotel room for all of the guests so that they can self-isolate safely. But our next phase is to open up what we're calling Las Casitas, which means the little homes. And that is an invitation for community members to open up their own individual homes to host one guest, maybe once a month in their house. And so that is a safer way, right? Instead of having 10 or 15 people in a couple of bedrooms all at once at Casa de Paz, there may be 10 or 15 different homes across the city that are hosting one individual person at a time. And that will also deepen the experience for the guest because they get a little bit more individualized attention. And it provides an opportunity to invite others into practicing the art of hospitality.
I just have to weigh in. I love that that's the way you guys have adjusted to this. I think it's so great. And you can tell from the film, there's just always a lot of people around, certainly on the evenings. We filmed a lot during the day, but even during the days, like it's a bustling place. And, there were people writing holiday cards and delivering them and coming. And, there were people who needed rides back to ICE, which is a really scary thing to do. And people coming in and out and, oh, I brought you this. And, oh, I just wanted to drop off a cake that I made. And, it's beautiful and lovely. But I just think it's so special. I would love, there's a whole other film to be made about Las Casitas once that is up and running, because I think it's just, what a brilliant kind of iteration.
And Casa de Paz isn't going anywhere. We're still going to have our home where we will operate kind of as our base center and still host guests, but we just won't probably have 10 or 15 at once anymore.
Well, I'm curious with documentaries usually too, especially in this one, as you're filming it, because we've talked to other documentary filmmakers who were just like, I was going to start with a short film and then I just kept filming and life happens and it became a feature. Did you feel like there was a good wrap point when you were filming this, or did you go into it with like a kind of a narrative skeleton that you wanted to hit a few certain points in order to document the work that was going on? Or, sorry, that's several questions all wrapped into one, but like, how did you go about structuring it and realizing, oh, it's done, it's ready to get out to the world?
That is a great question. There is more than one feature film to be made probably around this, in this space. There are so many important aspects to immigration. I felt like if I made a longer project, it would really have to go into policy and some of the policy changes. There's also other groups that are helping people. There's a gas station very near the ICE detention center that people get released to. And we have one of my favorite scenes that didn't make the film is a guy who gets released and goes to the gas station, and there's this amazing gentleman and now this family that helps people, and they give water and coats. Wow. And the guy who got released goes in and he doesn't have shoelaces in his shoes because they take them away when you're in prison. His shoes don't really fit. And the guy working at the gas station looks over and says, oh, what size feet do you have? And he takes the shoes off his feet and gives them to this gentleman. And it's just so beautiful. Mm-hmm. A lot of times Sarah will be at the casa and they will get calls from the gas station saying, hey, we have people here who either need to come to you, but also there's a Sikh temple north of the detention center that also takes a lot of different people and helps get them to their family. So there's some other, I knew that there was sort of a large scope that we could go into. But when we filmed, I wasn't sure if what we had or how long it would be. But when we filmed, I felt like if we made it a short, then we might get people to put their eyeballs on it we're not going to sit down and watch a feature-length film about immigration. That maybe we could do these screenings, local community screenings, and really reach an audience that had sort of disengaged from the immigration conversation. Maybe it's too political, or I don't really believe that, or I'm for the wall. And I just think that that's really important. And I loved that I could tell this slice of a story that you really don't have to take a super strong political side to understand that for anyone to understand my community and my neighborhood is really going to be safer if there's a mechanism to help people who have been released, who are legally allowed to be here, and aren't just being dumped on the streets. without any thought.
Sure.
Mhm.
So that was the motivation. I felt like this, if I just wanted to keep it about Casa de Paz, I could make a really powerful short and reach some of those communities. That said, I will say I had no idea if we had anything. And when we have an amazing editor named Chelsea Jackson, and she really helped me understand as she reviewed the footage and started to put it together. She really helped me feel like, no, there is a complete story here that we can tell. But it's very hard when you're a filmmaker. You ask yourself a million times, like, I don't know, what is there? Did I shoot anything? Was that good? How did today go? I can't tell. Let's do it all again tomorrow. So there's a lot of, rewriting and writing in your head. And maybe if we put these pieces here, but it was
Sure.
there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. Good job, though. Good job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sarah, on the side of putting things together, when I was watching your film a while ago, I logged on to your website for Casa de Paz, and I thought it was impressive, but I realized you recently rolled out a new version of the website. So what made you change it?
A couple years ago, one lady went to our volunteer training. Her name is Jessie Broom, and she specializes in rebranding companies. And she approached me in a very kind way and said, hey, if you're ever interested in talking about maybe a logo refresh or a website refresh, please reach out to me. I would love to do this at no cost. And it kind of got me thinking, because when I started Casa de Paz 9 years ago, I didn't put any thought into our logo, to be honest with you. I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not a marketing expert. And I went to my friend Caleb, who was the only graphic designer I knew, and I asked him to design a logo for us. And he gave me the logo, and I was like, great, it works. And we've used it ever since. And I didn't realize how much you could convey with a beautiful logo and a beautiful website. And I took Jessie up on her offer, and we've been going through a process of really understanding what is our brand, what is the feeling that we want people to feel when they see our logo or they visit our website or they read a brochure. And I'm super excited because yesterday we launched our new website, and I understand that people have so many different things that they could put their attention to. So when somebody is Googling immigrant detention or volunteering in Denver or whatever the case is, I want to be able to give them an experience that quickly and succinctly will give them the information that they're looking for. My mom, when she was reviewing the new website, she texted me and she said, you know what? I have gone to, my parents used to live in Europe, and a lot of my family actually live in France. And my mom has been to the Louvre many times. And she said, Sarah, every time I go to the Louvre, I get frustrated because they give you a map where you can walk around the museum and you're always lost. The maps don't make any sense. She said, when I go to the Casa website, I know exactly where I need to go to find what piece of information I'm looking for. And I took that as a very high compliment that somebody, I mean, I know it's my mom, but it's still somebody who thinks our website is more organized than the Louvre. So yeah, I'm really, really proud of our new website.
Since Sarah mentioned her mom, I just have to say, still to date, we've shown the film to all different audiences, gotten a lot of different feedback, but your mother, it was what your mother said after she first saw the film that I still hold as like, yes, this is why I made this movie. And she said, Sarah was a sort of, she was not politicized before she took this trip that she mentioned to Mexico. She was not like, right? I mean, is that fair to say? Like you said to me, like you were like, build, or was it your mom who was like, build the wall, build it as high as you can. So your mom watched the film, she had tears streaming down her face, and she just said, like, I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh. I never thought about these issues. And if anyone watches this film and doesn't walk away with a change in their heart, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
It meant so much to me. It was all I wanted.
That's a poster quote.
Yeah, exactly. My family, I was raised in a very conservative Christian home. I was homeschooled. We listened to Rush Limbaugh, watched Fox News. And so what I learned about immigrants growing up was that they were stealing our jobs and they were here illegally, and we should just kick everybody out and build the wall higher. And thankfully, my family has taken a very beautiful journey of unlearning, relearning, and growth. None of us believe any of those things that I just said anymore. And I that gives me hope too, right? Like it's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I think people could change. It's like, I've seen it, and it didn't just happen with me, it happened with my whole family. So that gives me hope
Right.
too.
And I felt like that was the motivation for me, is that I'm not religious and I'm definitely not Christian. And it was, to go and make this film and talk to people who are self-identified evangelical Christians and devoting their time and lives to fixing immigration problems and fighting against bias for refugees. Like, it was everything I needed to hear at the time when I first learned about the work that you were doing.
And that's funny. You've both kind of answered the last questions that we were going to ask, but I'm going to restate them anyway. What do you hope the film Welcome Strangers puts out into the world? Sarah and then Dia.
I hope that people can understand that no act of kindness is too small, and that something that we might consider small or insignificant can really be powerful, not only when we're showing compassion and kindness to strangers, but also when we show it to ourselves. And so I hope that people watch the film and they take some time to reflect on what they believe, why they believe it, and start to take a journey of exploring if there are possibilities to change their mind, change their heart, and open themselves up to a possibility that things don't always have to be this way. We can live in a world that is a more just world. It's a better world for not only for themselves, for their loved ones and their friends, but for everyone, even people that they don't know.
Well, you can't really say it better than that. It might be the best note to leave it on, but also just that people can say, what can I do? How can I help? You do not have to devote your life to this to make a difference. A meal makes a difference. A ride makes a difference. Writing a letter to someone who's incarcerated makes a difference. There are very many small acts that we can do that change the experience for people. And I just love, it starts with this idea of saying, welcome to the first thing that Sarah told me the day I met her was, welcome. We say, oh, welcome to the United States. We're so glad you're here. And I just think in that one sentence, you've said everything that you need to say to make people know that this is where they belong.
I think that Anne Frank says it the best. She says, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world.
It's very cool. And I think sharing this film makes a difference. So thank you for putting it out there, both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Showing it.
This is fun. We love talking. We really love talking about the movie.
You can't tell.
That works for us.
This is our baby. This is our baby. We're so proud of it.
Well, it was so fun too. It was such a fun movie to make. I mean, people, it's just like we just got to really get to know each other and stay friends. And, we talked to just my friendship with Oliver, my friendship with Sarah, and various people who we met, and just relationships with the people who come through the Casa. It's just been a deeply rewarding project to be part of.
Thank you both so much. Our guests have been Dia Sokol-Savage, director and producer of the film Welcome Strangers, and that film's featured subject, Sarah Jackson, founder of Casa de Paz. You can see Welcome Strangers as part of SIF 45 Streams, which continues through April 20th, 2021. For more details, log on to the SIF website, clevelandfilm.org. I'm Dee Perry.
And I'm Aaron Spears.
We want to thank our sponsor for this podcast, Wayside Furniture, keeping it local since 1937. We also want to invite you to support your local film festival. Please consider a donation to the SIF Challenge Match presented by Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Our goal is to reach $145,000 this year to support the future of our festival, and we're so grateful for any amount you're able to contribute. To donate, please visit clevelandfilm.org. And thank you for listening to SIF Speaks.